Aloha, I'm Mililani Trask. I'm the Legacy Leader for this 2021 edition of the Spirit Aligned Legacy Program, which assists us in transmitting traditional knowledge from generation to generation. In this little video, I'm going to be sharing with you what our project is about, what our goals are, and what we hope to achieve. What we're doing is we're aiming to protect and preserve into perpetuity a very sacred place on the big island of Hawaii known as Kumukahi. From time immemorial, this place has been known as the aurora of the Hawaiian people and our culture. It is the place where the sun first rises on our vast lands and ocean resources. We began by looking to see how we could create a mechanism that would survive our own short lives into the future, because the protection of sacred places of Native peoples is an obligation that we assume into perpetuity. We realized that someday we would die, and that's why we needed a non-profit corporation that would be able to continue in maintaining this sacred obligation to protect and preserve not only a sacred place for the sunrise, but also the many, many traditional burials that over the generations have been interred there. This is why we created our own nonprofit called Wai Welawela. It was named by the future legacy leader of our SALP program. Its name refers to the hot springs that are there, that are heated by the natural geothermal resources of the area. Our project first began by bringing together some of the families from the Kumukahi area to talk about what we could do to ensure the perpetuation and protection of this area for future generations. Wai Welawela has set forth its corporate purposes. Those that we work with are primarily Hawaiian lineal descendants or Hawaiian traditional practitioners. Some of the Hawaiians that have gone there, like myself, go there for the purposes of worshiping, because the sacred sunrise services are the most important. But many of our members are lineal descendants. They're the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of those Hawaiians who lived in that area and whose iwi kupuna, whose burials continue to reside there. The purposes that we set forward for ourselves was to perpetuate and preserve this land, and to work with lineal descendants who not only reside in the area, from wherever they come, from other islands, those who reside on the continent, to maintain and continue to preserve and protect this area. This is why our corporate purposes identify us primarily as lineal descendants. The reason why Kumukahi is so significant is because its location places it in one of the primary fishing areas of our people. There are many practices that occur there, not only the sacred sunrise services, but also the walking trails along the shoreline, which have been used from time immemorial by those who are fishing, who are engaged in subsistence gathering from the ocean and also from the land. Eastern gateway through which you can gaze and measure the movement of the sunrise as it goes from season to season. For all of these reasons, this area became a location not only for traditional burials, but for sacred heiau, places where Hawaiians went to worship. We have to begin by finding out the history of these lands. What happened to these lands after the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy by the U.S. military? In our work, by doing a land title research so that we could understand what happened to these lands following the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy many years ago. In order to get this data, we started with what we had. We looked at the county records right here on the Big Island. The county maps showed the location of Kumukahi, the easternmost promontory of Hawaii Island. Those county maps also provided us with data relating to the deed of ownership. This research and these documents were on the island of Oahu, and with the help of Hawaiians there, we were able to get copies of the deed. The deed showed us that in 1988, the United States returned these lands. They were supposed to come back to the state of Hawaii to be held in trust for the public and for Native Hawaiians, but they were never returned to the state DLNR because the University of Hawaii interceded, told the federal government that they needed the lands for educational use, and so back in 1988, the federal government returned these lands to the University of Hawaii system. At that time, the deed required that the university would have to accept several obligations. Number one, the obligation to preserve and protect the sacred sites. But number two, the obligation to maintain the public and the Hawaiian access ways, and also to preserve the area and protect the structures, the Eastern Gate, and the marking stones that were there. So there were many obligations imposed on the university. To what happened in the years that elapsed from 1988 to the present was that the University of Hawaii failed in its obligation to the Hawaiian people, the public, and to these sacred places. In 2020, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs wrote to the university to notify them that the area was being subjected to use by people who were trashing it and also engaging in illegal activities such as drinking and drug use. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs sent a letter to the university requesting that they maintain their obligations and work with the community. The University of Hawaii ignored that request, and again in 2021, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs renewed their request, but the University of Hawaii never responded. And at that point, the community, which had been hoping to be able to work with the university, decided that the time had come that they take matters into their own hands and go forward trying to establish a dialogue with the University of Hawaii and also seeking some responsibility under the applicable federal laws. When you look at the corporate purposes of Wai Welawela, you'll see what our simple goals are. We want to protect and preserve this area. We want to work with lineal descendants to ensure that the burial places of their family is maintained. We also want to address some outstanding problems. The area has been subjected to rapid commercialization. People, tour groups, individual, and even car rental agencies that regularly advertise about the sacredness of the area, but continue to trespass onto the area, and so there has not been a protective regime in place either by the State Department of Land and Natural Resources or by the university. For this reason, the community decided that we would seek to have a burial treatment plan undertaken by the university, as well as a preservation plan for the entire 58 acres. This has been our primary goal, and it's to this end that we have now begun a discourse with the university and also the State Department of Land and Natural Resources. We're now in our 4th month of our SALP program, and we are finally at the point where this dialogue has begun.